here we are at my top 10 games of all time list. Wow. If you've been watching since I started back with number 50, thank you so much for sticking by me. And as a reward, I'm not going to ramble anymore here. Let's just get going with number 10. I don't know if you've noticed from my list so far, but I'm not a big fan of cooperative games. But my number 10 game, Time Stories, breaks that rule. Now, some of you may disagree with me on this one because I have heard wildly different opinions on this game. But for me, Time Stories has provided the most entertaining game sessions I've ever experienced, so it's earned that top 10 spot. I like that Time Stories offers enough flexibility for game groups to explore it as they want to, but it still has enough structure so it doesn't feel like a free-for-all. I really like that each adventure feels completely different, so while one may be really puzzly, another one may be really story-oriented. I don't even mind when the ending felt a little bit random because I had so much fun on the journey to get there. Now, some players will complain that Time Stories isn't replayable, and I can understand that, although I bet if I were to play this game with a totally different group and kind of let them lead the way, I'd still have a blast. That said, I think Time Stories is a great game to have on hand so I can teach other players and then just get to watch how they explore the story because I bet it'll be completely different from the way my game group handled it. Personally, I think Time Stories is innovative. It's beautiful, it's engaging, and all of that deserves praise, and that's why Time Stories is my top 10 game. My number 9 game is Kemet. And like Time Stories, this is a rule breaker for me because I don't typically love dudes on a map games, and Kemet is most definitely a dudes on a map game. That said, I think what sets Kemet apart is that it rewards aggression. There's just no reason to turtle up in this game, and that creates a really dynamic game experience. Kemet's also really strategic. From that very first decision you make as far as which pyramids you want to put into your city, and then you get to add in all of those power tiles and action management on your board. I really love trying to build up an army that will do what I want to do and kind of have complementary abilities through those power tiles. On top of all of that, Kemet is a beautiful production. Every army has its own little sculpts, and those monster minis are so impressive, and I think that helps immerse you into the game. For whatever the reasons, I just love Kemet. I have so much fun playing it, and that is why it is my number 9 game. Coming in at number 8 is Mysterium. I actually prefer the Polish edition because I like the more gothic art and the streamlined rules, but for pronunciation's sake, I will call it Mysterium. Now, I was a little bit surprised to see a cooperative game in my top 10, but Mysterium is different, and I thought about it, and I realized I like it because it's all about the players and not about the game. Everything in Mysterium is so interpretive, and it will differ wildly depending on who's the ghost and who are the players and what group are you with in the moment. And I think that is all so much fun. I mean, when the ghost plays a card, are they trying to indicate the color, the material on it, the evocative theory of flight? I mean, I don't know. And when you're the ghost, it's so stressful to listen to the players talk through the cards. And always, somebody will nail the exact reason you played a card, and then somebody else will talk them out of it. So it's your job to circle them back around and get them back on track with the next card you play. And all of that combines for a wonderful game and shared experience between the players. And I think that's magical. I will always play a game of Mysterium. I've played well over 50 games of it already. And that is why Mysterium is my number 8 game. My number 7 game is Quinto. I mentioned it with Steamrollers, but I'm a big fan of roll and write games, and Quinto is the pinnacle of these right now. So Quinto's just 3 different dice, and they're one of each color, and then a score pad. That's it. The active player is going to pick which of these dice they want to roll. They could roll all 3 or just one, and it's their choice. And then whatever comes up, the active player must write that number on their score pad, and the inactive players may write that number. So instantly, all the players are engaged on every turn. Now, talking about that score pad, there are 3 rows that match the colors of dice. So if the purple die is rolled, whatever number comes up has to be written in the purple row. If the purple and yellow die are rolled, well, then you can pick. Do you write that number in purple or in yellow? It's your choice. And it's open field, so you can write that number wherever you want. The only rule on that score pad is the numbers always have to ascend from left to right. So then you start playing the odds because, well, how likely is it a 2 is going to come up? How likely is it you're going to get an 18? How do you want to position these numbers on these rows? Because if you complete a row totally full up with numbers, then you get a lot of points. Moreover, there are columns, and if you manage to complete a column, there's a number in a pentagon, you get to score those points as well. So managing your rows, managing your columns, figuring out the odds, and then selecting dice based on those odds, that is a lot of game. For such a small game, Quinto is incredibly thinky and incredibly engaging. Because all the players are engaged at all time, the energy never stops. And I've literally had players chanting, roll them all, during games of Quinto. That's how much fun it is. Quinto doesn't have a US release, which I think is a crime. It is a phenomenal game, and it is my number 7 favorite game of all time. Coming in at number 6 is La Granja. La Granja is a game that's made up of disparate parts pulled together into a single game, and I think it works really well. I like dice drafting, and so I really like La Granja's action selection through dice drafting. And then I think the market board works really well with that light area control element that gives you bonuses, but I also really like that you can kick out underpowered players if you want to. But of course, the magic in La Granja is in those multi-use cards. Each card can be used as a farm enhancement for its special ability, as a resource generator, or as a market goal. And choosing between those can be incredibly difficult as you're playing the game. And that kind of tension is awesome. La Granja just comes together in a beautiful way. I love the challenge of building up an engine that fires on all cylinders. I love a game that has donkey actions as you're trying to gauge what players are going to do and what they have left in their donkey pool. And of course, any game that has a nap track is okay with me. La Granja is a game that I love exploring, and every game I play, I experiment with something a little bit different, and that is so much fun. So there you go, La Granja, my number 6. In a bit of number irony, my number 5 game is 6 Nimmt. This is one of those wonderful card games that I think everybody should own. I can play it almost anytime, anywhere, with anyone. First of all, it plays 2 to 10 players, and it plays 2 to 10 players well because you play at the same time. You're going to get dealt a hand of cards, you pick one to play, and you simultaneously reveal it, and then it gets played to the tableau. In that shared tableau, there are 4 rows of cards. And basically, you play the cards in kind of numerical order. So if there's a 34 down and somebody plays the 36, maybe the 36 will go down next. The trick is, if you play the 6th card to a row, you have to scoop up all the other cards in that row. And cards mean points, and points are bad. Because all of the cards have a variable number of bullheads on them, and bullheads are points, so bullheads are bad. And, you're always playing the odds in this game. You're looking at your hand and you're trying to be flexible compared to what's on the board, but you just kind of have to deal with what you get. The rules of 6 Nimmt are super simple, but you are making active decisions as you play. So, Six Nimped is a game that has simple rules but has difficult choices. It is accessible but complex and strategic. And there's a lot of luck involved, but you're always playing the odds. And that is a pretty amazing combo for a simple card game. So, Six Nimped is my number 5 game. My number 4 pick may surprise some of you because it is Magic the Gathering. Remember me talking about Robo Rally and Quarto? Well, I was playing those games in between rounds of Magic because Magic is my actual gateway game. And then, the culture of Magic shifted and it wasn't as much fun to play with strangers. And then a lot of money went into the game and I couldn't keep up, so I stepped back. But a few years ago, I got pulled back in. But thanks to the EDH format in casual play, I love Magic again. EDH is a format in which you are building a 100 card deck with all singletons. You can't have any duplicate cards except for basic land. And the deck building potential with this format is off the hook. You can have so much variety in the game. You can build wildly thematic decks or super weird power decks, and you can experiment with combos that you would never try in competitive play. And that is a ton of fun. EDH Magic with good friends around the table is a really satisfying game experience, and it really kind of scratches that Magic itch for me. So number 4, Magic the Gathering, EDH casual style. I will always play it. My number 3 game may surprise some of you, and some of you may tell me I am cheating the system because my number 3 game is Pinochle. Yep, the good old classic, oddly spelled game, Pinochle. Now, bear with me, please, because Pinochle is really a gamer's classic card game for a few reasons. First of all, you play Pinochle in partners, so it sets up a really fun team dynamic. And then everybody gets dealt a hand of cards. You have perfect knowledge, so there's a lot of odds calculation and strategy. And then you bid. And what you're really doing is you are setting a point target for whomever wins the bid. But winning the bid does a few things. One, if you bid too high, you put yourself at risk of missing your point target and not scoring points. 2, it puts you in control of the game as you lead out for the trick taking. And 3, it opens you up for more opportunities for the next phase of the game, which is the meld. Now, in the meld, basically, if you win the lead, you get to trade a couple of cards with your partner, and then you're looking at your hand and you're trying to find specific sets or patterns of cards that are worth points. If you have those sets, you can choose to play them down in front of you, open to the whole table, and then you get to do a few things. 1, you score points, and that's good. But then 2, you've just revealed a bunch of your hand to your partner and to your opponents, which creates an interesting scenario. And 3, sometimes a good meld doesn't make for a good play hand, so that adds extra tension as you're fighting for tricks in the next phase of the game. And the next phase is basically a pretty standard trick-taking game in which the aces, tens, and kings will count for points if you can manage to collect them. Now, for those of you who are saying, I'm kind of cheating by saying Pinochle, well, let me share this story with you. My love of gaming started way before I ever learned about Magic the Gathering. It started around a table with my grandparents who played a lot of these classic card games like Bridge and Spades and Euchre and Hearts. And without a doubt, my love of gaming started out because I sat around a table with my grandparents learning these games. So Pinochle has a special place in my heart. Classic card games have a special place in my heart, and I would not be the gamer I am today without them. All that said, if you've never tried Pinochle before, I definitely recommend you give it a try. It is a ton of fun, and it deserves my number 3 spot. Going back to my love of Euros, my number 2 game is Fields of Arle. I told you that Uwe would be back in my top list. Fields of Arle is a 2-player only game that is, well, it's immense. It is a worker placement game, but with so many options, it's often called a sandbox game, and it truly, truly is a sandbox Euro, which is not common at all. Fields of Arla is kind of a traditional Uwe game, farming game in a lot of ways, although I really love the connection to his personal story that it has. But in Fields of Arla, you're going to be managing farmland, draining bogs, collecting peat, breeding animals, taking advantages of buildings, and managing resources, all the while managing your worker pool to do different actions and things like that. I mean, it's pretty standard fare. But really, Fields of Arla it's an exploration game. And because you're always going to be limited in the number of workers and rounds that you have, that creates an incredible tension with the openness of everything else. Fields of Arla has, I don't know, dozens of viable strategies for victory. I don't know. I haven't even begun to touch all the different options you have in this. And that is so cool. Fields of Arla also has a great solo play mode where you're just vying for points. I mean, yeah, the game is a bear to set up and break down, but it's really rewarding when you take the time to do so. Fields of Arla is a game that never gets old because it never feels the same. Even though you are structurally using the same mechanisms every game, because there are so many different options, it always feels different. And I think that is truly something special. And that is why Fields of Arla is my number 2 game. Well, here we are at my number 1 game. And for those of you who know me, you might not be surprised to find out my number 1 game is Caylus. This classic worker placement game has really withstood the test of time for me. I mean, I've played it for a decade and I still love it. Caylus has a lot of elements of worker placement games that just click together quite well. You have resources that you're trying to gain and manage to build buildings, contribute to the king's castle, or gain different kinds of favors. But there are a couple of things that set Caylus apart. First of all, I really like that you can control the pacing of the game, and it also adds a little bit of player interaction, so to speak, because there's this provost and bailiff character, and you can maneuver those up and down the path of the village. Well, if you have a riskier player that goes down to the end of the path because there's a really juicy building down there, if an opponent manipulates the provost and bailiff backwards, there's a chance that building will not activate, stranding that worker and making a player very grumpy. Another element of the game I really like is that you can choose to just stop placing workers. And if you're the first person to do that, you get a buck, but it also forces the other players after you to start paying to place their workers. And that can be a huge element in the game that you definitely have to pay attention to as you're playing. People have asked me, don't you get tired of Caylus? And I really don't. And I was thinking about it, and I think that's for 2 things. I like Caylus because it strikes a balance between versatility and predictability. It's versatile because it has enough variability in the way the tiles work out that it makes it interesting. But more importantly, Caylus plays very differently depending on who you're playing with because it feels different depending on a player's aggressive versus conservative play styles. And then there's that predictability comment. What that really means to me is Caylus has a rhythm to it, and I really like that rhythm. I like the way you're watching these buildings come out and you're trying to puzzle out what resources you can get and sacrifice and things like that. I like that you have to gauge when is the right time to go into the castle to ensure you score points there. And I like that you can gain the king's favors, and sometimes they pay off and sometimes they don't, and sometimes you don't have any choice. I think all of those pieces come together in a really great Euro-style game experience. So while I've played Caylus for a decade, I still love it. I still think it's fun and challenging and intriguing. And really, where would I be if I didn't have that grumpy old king glaring at me all the time? So Caylus is my number 1 game. Well, there you have it, my top 50 games of all time. Wow. I want to say thank you so much for watching. I'd really like to hear back from you. What did you think of my list? Were there any surprises? Did you disagree with any of my choices? Are there any games I didn't talk about that you think I should have considered? Leave me some notes in the comments so I can figure out what you think about all of this. And really, doing a top 50 has been weird and wild. It forced me to think about games in a way I don't usually think about them, and that has been a wonderful exercise. So I wanted to say thank you to Tom and the Dice Tower for giving me this opportunity. And certainly thank you to all of you who've been watching and commenting along the way. I really appreciate your support, and it's been a ton of fun. All that said, talking about all these games has made me want to play all these games, so hopefully I will see some of you at a table soon.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.